Artificial intelligence has become the latest technological marvel across the globe. Companies either utilizing it to supplement their technological prowess or looking towards their utilizing it. AI possesses great positives, and also at the same time it also poses a great risk politically. So the upcoming Kigali AI Summit taking place in Rwanda aims to strengthen bilateral ties between African states looking to find a way forward in terms of AI. It's certainly interesting. Online, Dr. Paul Kariuki, Executive Director of the Democracy Development Program at the University of KwaZulu Natal and convener of the Africa Policy Circle. Dr. Paul Kariuki, welcome to the African Mirror section of this program.
Thank you so much, Shafiq, for having me on the show, and good afternoon to your listeners.
It's very interesting to see Rwanda, which is at the vanguard of a lot of things happening in Africa. Some good, some not so good. But nonetheless, this is certainly interesting that Africa is waking up to the landscape of AI.
Yes, definitely. And I think it's an important conversation we are having now because our continent is in a rush to be able to catch up with the rest of the world in terms of technological advancement. And we cannot avoid the conversation about how artificial intelligence is going to help us to leapfrog in this transformation journey. And it's very important to notice that while it seems like the continent has been left behind on many other things, at least there is one part of our development, global development, that the African continent is now being, seen as an active participator. And it can never be more appropriate to have this kind of a conference on our soil in Kigali.
And of course, people haven't thought about AI politically much, have they? Everybody talks about AI in the workplace, in the media. We talk about AI a lot. Some people see it as a threat. I don't, because AI sometimes gets things wrong, and that's where our responsibility lies as the media. But how do we understand AI in the political realm?
And that's the importance of having this conversation, Shafiq, because it's part of ourselves to be able to be self-aware as citizens and also understand where the intersections are in terms of political and development journey. So in terms of understanding what it contributes and how AI is going to contribute to political development is that the infrastructure of the AI is still at the very infancy stages on our continent, because each country is trying to grapple with the idea of how do they create a regulatory environment that does not predispose the countries to cybersecurity threats, because it has a lot to do with that. However, on the other hand, it's about fast-tracking development agenda of the individual countries that will facilitate them to take advantage of this emerging technology that has potential to advance, the country's developmental trajectory by, revolutionizing systems that have been, very much connected to manual way of working things, or even slower technologies that are not able to fast-track the development that they desire. The political nexus then comes in that point, because it all involves three things from a political point of view. And is resource allocation. Can countries be able to have resources from their own budgets to be able to invest in technological infrastructure that will support AI development or use or adoption? Secondly, is there sufficient political will to support that kind of investment decisions? And thirdly, is there political will to support policy regulation? Because it has to have a place from which it is supported from, and that is a regulatory mechanism. That cannot be done by anybody else except governments in collaboration with a range of stakeholders like the private sector, academia, research institutions, and the like. And so those three things make it a political situation, because it has to involve high levels of political leadership to support the leapfrogging that it presents to nations. So from that point of view, yes, there is a political angle to artificial intelligence adoption.
And of course, I learned the other day that the technology exists already, that we would be able to travel without even carrying any documents due to facial recognition. So I, for example, could climb into an aeroplane in Cape Town, fly to Johannesburg, go through customs, just via facial recognition, go to for Vietnam, for example, facial recognition and come back. That is where it's actually leading to.
It is going there, and it's going there very fast, Shafiq, because the adoption of this technology by certain countries is on a very advanced spaces compared to where we are as a continent. But it's getting to such kind of spaces where a lot of the bottlenecks that we've been experiencing, challenges in terms of travel, like I'm mentioning, or healthcare, or logistics, or even agriculture, they're adopting these systems that are AI-driven systems that fast-track the process of delivery, increasing efficiency and effectiveness. However, let me hasten also to say that the advancement is not without a cost. Some of the costs associated with the advancement of such technologies is like what you're mentioning, where we use facial recognition to facilitate that process. However, the risks with that is that now with the growing cyber crimes, such technology can be adopted by criminals, and they can use it for their advantage. And before you know, you're picked up for a case that you don't even know you appeared because somebody cloned your face and made it as if you are actually actively involved in something that can predispose you to security challenges. So when we talk about the regulatory frameworks that African countries are trying to grapple with at the moment, is to ensure that with the advancement and adoption of this technology, also the citizenry is not exposed to cyber crimes that are very easy to be committed when there is regulatory loopholes and there is no sufficient watchdog mechanisms adopted by different countries to support security protection, and I think this is where it becomes tricky for countries, especially in Africa, because our infrastructure is still very much at the infancy stages, and then number two, there is very little at the moment on ground to regulate and control, ensuring that there's sufficient security checks, that nobody can take advantage of AI to the detriment of the national security.
Final question. It does seem as if some African states are serious about this. The fact that Kigali is hosting a conference on AI is telling me that under the radar, as it were, there seems to be some intention, at least, not least of all, from Rwanda in terms of using AI technology in the political sphere.
Yes, and that's actually, I think, the positive part, because there is a movement in terms of leadership understanding, political leadership understanding of the importance of this technology in adapting to their various conditions. And there is also an appetite to invest in it, only that it's a bit of course, as an emerging technology, it requires a significant investment, because one of the challenges we face as a continent at the moment is that we have very poor communications network, and the infrastructure that is available there is not able to sufficiently support a significant and immediate adoption of the AI as a technology to support delivery of services and improve government efficiency especially. So what this means right now is that there are a few things that the continental leadership needs to work on very quickly if they are going to leapfrog in the use of AI to improve government service delivery, to establish sustainable private sector support, and of course ensure that the public is involved in terms of the conversations around the use of AI-driven technology to fast-track service delivery at the local level. So firstly, they need to ensure that there is actually a legal framework that supports the adoption. As I said before, there is all kinds of loopholes that can be taken advantage of by cyber criminals that can expose a country to national security threats, and of course also to its citizenry. So that's the first thing that they need to do. And then the second thing, of course, is harmonizing data sovereignty sovereignty because it's important to know where is data domiciled. If that is also not taken advantage of, we've seen now even at very local levels where data is misused. Some people get to hack databases and then use that data to do all kinds of things, including promoting products that are not existing. Sometimes even in scamming people through access to people's information illegally and all that. And that's why South African government, for example, established what we call now the POPI Act. You've got to get some permission to use people's information. We cannot do that without their consent. But you see, South Africa is a little bit ahead of most countries. Most countries don't have that kind of a legal infrastructure to support security mechanism around accessing people's information without their consent. So it's important that this data sovereignty discussion takes place in different countries to ensure that they have a similar protective legislation like POPI Act that limits access of people's information without their consent. Most African countries don't have. And so it's important that while they have a regulatory framework, they need to have also legislation that protects people from being exposed to cyber threats. The third thing that of course they need to do, as we are discussing, is to remove or dismantle structural barriers that may hinder innovation. It's important that the investment that the countries are going to put up with supports the innovation that is being aimed at. Unfortunately, some of the structural barriers that we have in most African countries, that we have that inertia among leaders, political leadership, especially on the use of emerging technology. The threat of being fast-tracked and the discomfort of leaving the traditional mechanism continues to become a barrier in adoption of this kind of an emerging technology. Even though we know there is potential to fast track our development, there is also potential
Absolutely.
to increase services. But it's important that these three things are taken care of: establish legal frameworks, establish a legislation to support security checks, and of course invest and remove this barrier structure so that there is political will to invest sufficiently the resources that are needed to put the infrastructure needed to support the AI adoption.
And on that note, we conclude this week's edition of African Mirror with Dr. Paul Kariuki, Executive Director of the Democracy Development Program and convener at the Africa Policy Circle. Dr. Kariuki, as always, it's been a great pleasure.
Thank you so much, Shafiq, for having me on the show.